Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do have more great news for Donald Trump here today. We've got more polling data. We've got more models that show that Trump is up by a pretty significant margin and is expected to get at least 287 electoral votes. That's a conservative estimate, probably a lot more than that. But we do have Rasmussen with their latest poll. And you can see they do this daily or every other day. Donald Trump, if you look at the 5-day rolling average, he is up by 3 points. That's in terms of the electoral, or not the electoral, that's just in terms of the popular vote. And remember, Rasmussen, even though they are maybe more of a conservative pollster, they did underestimate Trump, in 2020. So these numbers over the past 5-6 days are certainly extremely positive. You can see in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 2.1. Real Clear Politics aggregate going into the election was 3.2, so Trump overperformed the popular vote average by 1.1. And of course, it was significantly better in 2020 with Biden, where Trump overperformed it by about 3 points. And this was even the overall result. This is with Hillary having a 2-point advantage in terms of the popular vote. Now, we know the votes are not going to be the exact same in terms of how they're distributed. It's a little bit confusing. Some states are going to go more for Trump. Some states are going to go less because that affects the popular vote. But in general, if Trump, right now we're seeing Rasmussen a 3-point lead. Even if Trump underperforms that by 2 or 3 points, which seems extremely unlikely. Again, this is where we're at today. It's probably going to change. But if Trump were to somehow go into the election night with around a 3-point lead, I think the election's totally over based off of everything that we've seen from Trump, the way he's been able to overperform. And even if he doesn't overperform, remember, he can lose the he can lose the popular vote by around 3 to 4 points and still win. So he could underperform by 6 or 7 points if he's leading by 3 going into election night and still win. That's just the way the Electoral College works. It's mainly because of the Democrats running up huge margins in the highly populated cities like LA as well as New York City. So, this was with Hillary. She won by 2 in terms of the popular vote. Right now, in terms of just the net aggregate, according to Real Clear Politics, Kamala is up by around 1.5. And so even if Kamala wins by 1.5, we would expect possibly a similar map to this. You could argue maybe Michigan. Really, at this point in 2016, we were thinking all the swing states, or at least, a lot of the pollsters were thinking all of the swing states were going to go to Hillary, including a state like Iowa, Florida, Ohio. The math is just so much different. That's why Democrats have really started to make a big stink about North Carolina, because they're trying to find more paths for Harris because the math has gotten so bad for her. Remember, in 2020 and 2016, going into election night, liberals would constantly say they would win Ohio, they would win Florida, and for good reason, at least in Florida. Trump won Ohio in 2016 by 8 points, but Florida was very close the last 2 times. Losing both of those states has forced them to try and, make North Carolina this battleground. And certainly you could say it is, but if you look at all of the numbers, you look at how Trump performed in 2016 and 2020 in North Carolina, the idea that he would lose that state in 2024 facing someone that was so disliked as VP, and Trump's got better numbers. Remember that New York Times poll? They freaked out. And it wasn't just because it was Trump +1, although that's very significant because we've never seen a New York Times poll this late in an election cycle with Trump having him lead the outright popular vote. But it was also the other metric numbers, including the unfavorability rating being the exact same between Harris and Trump. I think Harris was -5, Trump was -6. Remember, going into election night in 2020, Trump was like -14, Biden was +5. So now that they're basically, it's just like every data point is signaling a Trump victory, and we've got the huge debate tomorrow. It's certainly going to be big. But, I saw this. So this was a meme originally by Republicans, and the idea that, the left is trying to do it just in reverse, like, the Republicans have become far right under Trump. Trump, since 2016, has gone, I'd say, decently more left. You look at, remember back in 2016, and I wish Trump was going to say it this year, but he never said it. In 2016, Trump said, we need to shut the border down. Now he's not, even with all of this illegal immigration, he's not even saying to shut the border down. He's still saying he wants people to come into the country just legally and to deport all the illegal immigrants, starting with the criminals and all of that. So I think Trump's gone further to the left, and just the idea, especially just the country in general, where we are in the early 2000s. If you think that this is right, go listen to Bill Clinton's speech in the 90s on immigration, on illegal immigration. If you think that the right has gotten more right and the left has stayed the same, go listen to what Biden had to say in the 90s compared to what he's saying now. It is night and day. It's not close. So this is gaslighting. Why you shouldn't panic about the New York Times poll. This was always going to be a close race, but Harris has more upside than Trump. So the cope is happening with the left. They're saying, don't worry about it. Look, it's a single poll, but it is very significant. And I guess it was significant enough for them to release a little article talking about why you shouldn't panic. That's because the left normally only tends to pay attention to the liberal pollsters, and New York Times, man, they love New York Times. They would figure it would pump out a Kamala +3, +4 in terms of popular vote, and they would be fine. The fact that it's Trump +1, they've got to write these articles talking about, oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't even understand what that means. Has more upside than Trump? I would 100% disagree with that. I think if Kamala Harris wins this election, it's going to be extremely close, especially considering the math is different now with Ohio and Florida being both Republican strongholds. This is not like 2016 where there's 40 different paths like there were for Hillary. She couldn't even win it in 2016, but there were also a number of paths for Biden, way more paths than Trump. Now with Trump possibly opening up Virginia as well, there's so many different options. All of the internal numbers are saying it. And I mean, you're talking about being up 3, up 2 in terms of the popular vote. It is pretty crazy. U.S. presidential polling average. This is updated for September 8th. I'm guessing this is Real Clear, the Real Clear Politics numbers. They've got Harris +1.5. A lot of this is dependent on which polls you take into account. It looked like Harris at one point was sitting around +3, +4 back about a week and a half ago, and it's really narrowed, but this is still really good numbers for Trump. If Harris wins the election by 1.5, Trump's going to win, very, very, very likely. If Trump outperforms it even by a point and she wins by half a point, Trump's going to win that as well. We would really like to see Trump win the popular vote. There is a legit chance that Trump's going to win the popular vote, and we'll have to see how the debate goes. Maybe that'll help him even more in terms of that, but I would say right now I've seen some models. Trump's got around a 40 to 45% chance to win the popular vote. Of course, under Biden, Trump had like a 70% chance to win the popular vote. So it's still relatively high, and it is good. I mean, there's Trump rescuing the cats and the duck with what's going on in Ohio. It's very unfortunate in that small city. And so just an update on one of these models. This one has flipped for Trump. It was originally, I think Kamala at one point was up by 10%, and it has flipped for Trump. It's very important to understand that with a model like this, there was another one that I liked. Unfortunately, they paywalled it. But this one, I do not think it weighs for polling bias and negative polls that are against Trump. That's why you'll see some models that have Trump right now sitting at like a 62 to a 65% chance. That's because it's weighing all the polls, and it understands that some of the polls are better than others. A lot of the polls have underestimated Trump, so it weighs for that and thinks that Trump's going to overperform certain polls based on the fact that he's done that the past 2 election cycles. You can kind of be more aggressive with it. Now, if it had happened once, then I can understand you not taking that into account. But if Trump is consistently overperforming in certain liberal polls, you have to weigh against that. And so that's why I don't think this model does it at all, but it still has Trump at a 51% chance to win the election. And you can see there's the flip right there. So it did have her almost up by about 11, maybe 12 in terms of like a 56% chance to win. You could see when RFK dropped out. Originally, it didn't affect it a ton, and I don't think RFK is having like a crazy influence. To me, I think this is just standard what we expected. I mean, she was getting all this fake hype. We knew it was going to end, and this does a pretty good job of depicting it. I mean, you can see there it is. Trump has completely caught up and overtaken Harris again. Originally, when it was, I guess when she came in, Trump had a very high chance. That was mainly because we didn't have much polling, Trump versus Harris. The polling that we did have indicated Trump was going to crush Harris. A lot of that's because Harris was the VP, and when you do a hypothetical poll like that, when Biden's still the president, it's not going to look good for Harris, to be fair. But we knew they were going to pump a bunch of money into her. They did. Will Trump get back up to around 70%? If you weigh it properly, he could. With a model like this, I don't think so. He could get up to around 60, maybe 65. If he has a great debate, I just don't agree with this at all. It's got Harris. See, this would have almost Harris still sitting at 272. And then the popular vote, it's got Harris by 1.3. That's really good. Those are really good numbers for Trump as well. When you look at the overall popular vote, you take out RFK Jr., both of them go up a little bit, obviously, considering he's not in the election anymore. They also do have the tipping point states. Pennsylvania, by far the most important state in the election. And I think Pennsylvania, there's just so much confidence with it. And I think it's mainly because of just, it's almost like the great irony. Like, they didn't choose Shapiro because he was Jewish. I mean, that's why they didn't pick him. And even Biden people wanted him to be picked. It's like, you're going to lose the election because you didn't pick a dude because he's Jewish. It would be hilarious. And especially with all the good stuff coming out of Pennsylvania in terms of the voter registration, in terms of the early mail-in, the absentee ballot requests going way down at a much higher rate for the Democrats as well. It's not even just like we knew they were going to go down because it's not the pandemic, but in terms of if you compare Republicans, Democrats, the Democrats are going down so much more. That's the key thing we need to look at. And so, I mean, I think Pennsylvania's looking good for Trump. They've got Michigan as the second most important state. I mean, I would say North Carolina probably, unless you think Trump's going to win North Carolina. They've got Trump up by about 2.5 points in North Carolina. They've got the Dems up by, that's pretty encouraging, 0.5 point in Michigan, because there have been some more positive polls out of Michigan for Trump. We know that Pennsylvania and Michigan are going to be extremely close. If I had to guess, I would say Pennsylvania would be like a 1.5 point victory, maybe 2 point victory for Trump. Michigan is going to be within a point either way, but I would probably say it going to Trump. Remember, Biden won all these states by ridiculously close margins in 2020. It wasn't like Trump got blown out in any of these states. You could make an argument that Trump could win Pennsylvania by 2.5, 3 points based off of internal numbers and Trump's approval rating being way better, and the fact that the Kamala Harris hype, I mean, she hasn't done anything even after becoming the nominee. She becomes the nominee based off of, well, actually based off of Biden having a horrible debate performance. If Biden would have aced the debate, she'd still be the VP with a -15 approval rating. But it's like, not only did she not deserve it, she hasn't done anything on top of that. She won't do interviews. The arrogance. And then she does an interview and it's with Walt and they have to edit it and they won't release the transcripts. This is like a bad dream. And so this is why we're seeing all of these numbers come out. You can see Georgia. I think Trump's got a very solid chance to take back Georgia. Florida, obviously, I mean, they're going to say it's an important state, I think, because they still have it kind of as a swing state. It's not a swing state. I don't think Florida's all that important. I mean, it is important, but it's going to go to Trump. Wisconsin here, certainly Wisconsin's basically 50-50 right now. Texas, obviously, going to go to Trump. Arizona is another huge state. Minnesota and Virginia will be interesting. That they have Minnesota as a margin plus 4.2 for Dems. That's because there's a few recent polls out of Minnesota that were relatively close. Minnesota is an interesting state. Everyone kind of wrote off Minnesota because there were 2 polls that were released at the worst time if you are Trump. They were released like right after Harris was the VP with all of the hype, and they had Harris up by like 6 and 10, and everyone said Minnesota was going to go to Harris. But some recent polls have been closer. I'm not saying Trump's going to win Minnesota. Maybe Virginia is the higher chance with Youngkin, but those are 2 states that could be options for Trump. Obviously, Nevada is a pure swing state, but it only has 6 electoral votes. So this is just where we are. This is a visual representation right now of Trump flipping Harris in pretty much any type of poll outside of 538, which is just a meme at this point. I mean, 538, they've almost embraced how biased they are. I don't even think liberals can like defend their model and what polls they use and what polls they don't do. They're like blatantly biased. It's not even funny. It's just dumb. Like, what's the point of having a model if you're going to be this biased? It's just stupid. But I mean, it is what it is. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.